Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq hollering at you one more again. All right, folks. Had to make sure I caught the synchronicity, right? 333. Magnificent. All right. Well, an interesting week it has been, indeed, particularly in my personal life. But we find ourselves here yet again. Please, folks, excuse uh, my appearance today as I'm suffering from some issues with my eyes, right? Really, my contact lenses giving me some issues, right? My fault in terms of the usage. Hey, Carrie, there you go, sweetheart. Thank you, baby, for always being on time, right? Thank you for your support and love. I salute you. Ow, look like a big fist in the bow. Hey, worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. All right. But yeah, as I was saying, I'm going through some issues with my eyes, so excuse all the tearing up, right? Thank you. Oh, wow. Excuse all the tearing up, but it's just for my contacts. I'm not ill. I'm not sad. I'm not going through any other issues like that. It's just my contact lenses. So we'll push right through that and continue our discussion today. All right. Um, Thank you again, Sister Carrie, being right in here with me on time as usual. Magnificent. So I'm gonna leave a couple of minutes for everybody to jump in. But just to introduce today's subject, I did happen to put it in the description, but we will be discussing the collegiate experience, in particular, what that means, what that's like, and the impact of it, particularly during these times, right? During paradigm shift, when so much is in upheaval, so much is in flux, so much is changing, right? And so much is being revealed. Perhaps some things about the collegiate experience as well. All right. So again, aside from my frequent tearing up, as distracting as that might be, we will continue to get into the knowledge and the information, right? So, again, folks, forgive my light. In fact, I'm going to make a slight change. Give me a moment. I'm going to make a change in lighting, see if that helps me to be a little bit more free of the light sensitivity issue. One moment. All right. That feels a lot better. Bear with me. It's certainly a different visual look, but you guys can still see me, right? Carrie, shoot me some type of little emoji or something if you can still see me pretty good. Okay, thank you, baby. And I'm good and all that. I ain't got the matrix effects going on. Okay, thank you, man. All right, so today we're going to talk about the collegiate experience, right? As we wait on some more folks to come in, we'll just be here and catch them up to speed when they get in. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about the collegiate experience. Now, with this, I'm going to sort of start slow, so to speak. Not start slow as much as I'm going to start with the less controversial and then sort of ramp my way up. Okay. All right. So, first thing is, when we think of college these days in the United States, first, well, let's talk about what the collegiate experience used to mean, right? even as recently as when I was coming up through school. I was excited about the potential of going to college, right? Particularly because of what the message was, of what a college education meant. And that message was received not only by me, but by my parents and uh, um, all of my classmates and their parents around them, right? So this was a social message. Okay. Now, with that, um, we felt a certain promise, if you will. Okay. Not that these specific promises were made, but the hope and the idea of promise toward prosperity was cemented into our psyche, right? You were generally told if you get a college education, you pretty much have as much of a guarantee as you can get at a really good paying job at the least, and quite potentially a very exciting, very rewarding, and high paying career. Okay. These are the things that were highlighted, accented, and sold to us as reasoning for why we should really be wholeheartedly jumping into the collegiate experience, and why our parents should have us as children wholeheartedly invested in working our way toward the collegiate experience. All right. Now, I will say that during that time, there was a lot more fruition of that promise, or what we perceive to be that promise coming true, or coming to fruition. Most of the higher paying jobs pretty much had um, a college degree of some sort as a requisite, right? Or at least that's the trend that we were starting to see, right? And at the same time, having those college degrees for those higher paying jobs or careers um, was taking place, but was not as quite as commonplace, right? As we might say it is today. So fast forwarding to today, um, we see the same or a similar message in terms of the benefits or the reasons why one would invest their time, energy, and efforts toward working toward a college experience, and why families should do so for and in the interest of their children. Um, the question is, have we seen the same return? And I'll argue that we have not, for a couple of reasons that actually make sense. Number one reason why it has not been quite the same in terms of, first of all, let me make this statement. Or let me ask the question and follow it with an answer. Is the reward or the return on investment the same um, as today as to what we saw 20, 30 years ago? Okay. I would argue the answer is no. You see here, and this is something that any of you can verify for yourselves. You don't have to take my word for. That's right. Any of you can verify, in fact, right, that what we get as a return on investment is very different these days. Number one, the guarantee for said uh, um, extremely rewarding and extremely exciting and high-paying job and or career is not always necessarily a given. Okay, the way it may have been years ago, and because of that, we have a lot less. Let's see, if we were to make a statistic of, and they probably have this statistic, if we were to make a statistic of college graduates who felt like they were placed in the position of at least a pathway to wealth that they envisioned themselves having en route to their college experience, I would venture to say many of those college graduates would say no, right? How many times and how often have we heard individuals who have had a college experience or have ventured into a college experience, or those who had graduated from a college experience, return back to us very distressing news that it is in fact quite difficult for them to attain a job or a position in a career that is commensurate with what they went to school for in the first place, right? There is no guarantee of that happening, and the incidence of it happening is far less than expected, right? All right. I'll jump into the chat. And real quick, I'm just going to say an associate degree, this is Sister Carrie, an associate degree is nothing these days if you don't have a master's or your doctorate. All right. So with that statement, we see that there's now becoming or has developed a higher requisite. Okay. I will agree that there was years ago when associate's degree really did open you up to at least another level, right? Of positions that were available to you, of careers that were available to you, right? Maybe not necessarily at the top tier, maybe not necessarily your dream job, but it did sort of get you a level above what the average person who had just a high school diploma or a GED earned, right? So you had a little bit of an advantage that you still gained in the employment market, so to speak, the workforce, if you had an associate's degree. And now we see that that's almost not the case. It's almost like an associate's degree is regarded as like a glorified high school diploma. I mean, I know exactly what she's referring to. So with that, we're seeing that the jobs themselves are issuing out sort of a higher requisite. It's as though they're saying, well, hey, associate's degrees, everyone has them, but do you have this, right? Okay. Another aspect of this is that because you have had for a sustained amount of time, I'll say, this drive for more collegiate students and the associated connection between a college education and a really good job and or slash career. Since that association had been made and established for years now, in fact, decades, we can sort of see a little bit of the results of decades of the collegiate population growing and rising in this nation. Okay, simply because socially it had effectively been communicated. It had communicated it. Extra syllable there. It had been effectively communicated to us that that was more of a requisite in the work opportunity environment or the workforce, right? Okay. So, excuse me. Forgive me, folks. So, now we see a completely different picture, or at least starting to form a very different picture of what the collegiate experience could promise to provide um, for the students, and certainly return on investment for the parents, right? Okay. Um, but then we also have seen um, pushback from the other end, right? From the employer's end, whereas the degrees themselves have deteriorated in value, if for no other reason than they are far less rare. Okay. All right. So with that, what have we also seen? We have seen a big rise in complaint about student loan debt, right? Of course, there are um, means in which your college education could be paid for either in full or partially by way of scholarship. There are grants that come from the government and from corporations, and several different ways that college debt can be alleviated, usually not 100%. But for some, it can be alleviated in a great deal. But for most others, that's not the reality. Most Americans, as we see, are left with some sizable debt from the collegiate experience that years ago one would sort of forecast, well, I'll get a really good job and I'll pay it off quickly and it won't even be an issue. And as the years have gone by, the ability to do that in that way has decreased, right? And in my collegiate experience, just to be forthcoming, have not. I don't have a degree. I went to college 3.5 years, folks, and pushed back without a degree, which now I feel grateful for that I actually don't have. But that's a whole another podcast. Uh, but I'm one of those individuals who doesn't have, at least not a lot, not a lot at all, collegiate debt, right? In fact, the most collegiate debt I have is from my daughter going to college, right? Um, and even that is not nearly as sizable as what many people have taken on, not nearly, right? But it's there, and I get notices and all that other stuff, right? It's a real thing to be dealt with. So that's been my experience, but I know a lot of people who have, since my era, or when I quote unquote finished with my college experience, um, a lot of people who report that they just have not got back out of what they were looking for from the collegiate experience. They just not have not gotten that back, right? Um, okay, let's look at this from a little bit different angle. As parents, and many of us are, what do we look, or had we previously looked for as an experience for our children to have in the collegiate experience, right? What were our hopes for our children? I know in me sending my daughter off to college, to a university where she'd be away from home, not really far from away, only a couple of hours, even a little less, but still she'd be living away from home. I know I had many thoughts in mind of what I want to see her collegiate experience be like. Um, of course, the first thing I did was stop back to my own collegiate experience and some of the positive experiences I had within that, and most certainly I hoped for that to be part of her experience. A lot of things that stimulated my intellect, a lot of things that um, opened my eyes or exposed me to things that I might not have previously considered in the world, right? aspects of my education that may not have ever opened up had I not had the fruits of what my collegiate experience would be. Okay. But what sort of things about college were not what we might have expected, and certainly not what our parents had expected, or us as parents of our children who are currently attending, about to attend, or have recently attended college? All right. Well, here's where, regrettably or unfortunately, the conversation might get a little darker, right? Okay. As a boy or as a young man, just looking ahead to my college experience, even still in high school, as a senior, right? Um, which, by the way, my senior year in high school was very different to me. I think it was. I had one of those schedules where I was able to get out really early. As in high school, already you're out by like what 2:15, 2:30 in the afternoon. And with my schedule, I was out of school by like quarter after 12, something like that, right? Um, and because of that, I sort of in my mind bypassed or you might say speeded through or mentally projected myself right on through my senior year of high school. All right. Um, but I'll say that at its conclusion, I don't know what I expected the the actual collegiate experience to be like, but I do know, like I said, as a young man and in that time of life with my hormones raging, right? Uh, 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 nose wide open. I was in big time girl hunting phase, right? All about the ladies, right? And wanted that to be a big part of my collegiate experience. I wanted the partying and all that, but I did want to, at least in intention, do well with my studies. So I recognized that I had to have the ability to keep the distractions to a minimum. That was the recipe. Distractions to a minimum will give me the opportunity to get through college and to have some accomplishment and not just failure. All right. So I'm doing that. I'm going through college, and I just went to a local community college. I did take some classes at the University of Pittsburgh, but all right, that's me. Um, but in the collegiate experience, there were some things that were a little different to me, right? Um, the adult aspect of campus life was what I had started to experience, but kind of externally because I didn't live on campus anywhere, right? But being of that age, I did like to frequent other colleges and their campuses. And I did so, especially local colleges like IUP and um, some of the satellite Penn State campuses or the University of Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon, et cetera, whatever. I would like to visit their college environments and compare their experiences collegiately to mine, right? At least the fun that I was having or wanted to have, right? And in doing so, I didn't realize because of my age at the time what I was talking about. I was talking about some things that, you know, might not have necessarily been good for me or the best for me. Like the heavy alcoholism. Folks, do we know and realize the numbers? Do we know and realize the reality of what alcoholism looks like on the average, and I do mean average because this is nationwide, if not internationally, right? Do we know the reality of what alcoholism looks like on a collegiate campus in these universities? It is ridiculous, the alcohol consumption. Just in general, that you experience. And I remember one of the big things we used to want to do was go to the cake parties. And at the cake parties, we went with the expectation of drinking ridiculous amounts of alcohol, right? I think one time I went to a college party talking about I'm fitting to get my stomach pumped tonight. What? But this is the mentality as a young adult that you start to associate with the collegiate experience. Because as a young adult heading into this, you start to look for those quote unquote adult privileges of not being supervised or in an environment where your parents or elders have not only awareness of, but ability to sort of rein in your behavior. Okay? True that, right? Think about it. Let's be real about it, right? I know when I went to college, those are the things we all talked about. Not even just the guys, right? The girls talked about these things just as well. And not even just the rough and tumbly of us guys who thought about going to college or maybe even the athletes, whatever. I'm talking about the quote unquote nerds. We're talking about raging and how much alcohol and drugs they were going to do in college, right? Let's be real. What happens in these college campuses, on these universities, in these universities, right? What really happens? Alcohol, check. I mean exposure to they may as well had Kendrick Lamar back then. When I know I went to house because we swimming pools of alcohol, right? Drugs, check. Not only in availability, ready availability, but in variety. A lot of the stuff I got to college and I started hearing about people doing drugs and seeing people doing drugs I hadn't even heard of before. Okay? And this was my collegiate experience 30-something years ago, right? Or however long. Right? That was my experience. And then the other area, sexuality. 3 areas: alcoholism, drugs, sexuality. Now, as young adults, we all, I'm not jumping on some purity platform where I'm going to preach down to and take up the mantle of Mr. Chastity when it comes down to sexuality and what the experiences of young folks are. Now, I will say this. Remember that a large part of the reason why we go to college in the first place is socially motivated, okay? Which includes your peer group. Includes your peer group, right? You get pressure from your peer group, pressure that you put on yourself to establish a future, pressure from your parents who, quote unquote, want the best for you, right? And they do, but whether that's actually the best or not. Pressure from the administration, like your guidance counselors and teachers. Everybody's talking to you about, what's next. College is next. Got to get ready for college. You want to have a good life. You want to go to college. Okay? So the pressure is social in origin. And so are those expectations of taking advantage of or exposing ourselves to things that we may have felt as young adults held back from by our parents, when in reality, it's more like protected from by our parents, right? But now we're going into this environment, this collegiate environment, where those checks and balances are not in place, right? Remember, part of the allure of the collegiate experience is getting away from your parents. It's innocent in nature on the part of these children, folks. It's natural for young adults to want to explore their adulthood and to want to find themselves freed from the reign of parental control. That's all natural. I'm saying that the collegiate experience takes it to another level, right? Because they're in an environment where these things, the opportunities to sort of escape that parental control is there, right? On a higher level, because you're actually moving away from home, right? Even those who don't live on campus, you're away from home in an environment that is away from home for most of your time. Okay. All right. Also, the ready availability of all these really societal ills. If you think about it, right? We talk about the things that are bringing down our society: alcoholism, drugs, right? Sexual depravity. But they're all readily available, and even more so in the collegiate experience for our children, right? We're talking about 18, 17-year-olds, and in some case, 16-year-olds. I graduated when I was 16, y'all. Or no, I had just turned 17, pardon me. I just turned 17 that year. But in my senior year, I was 16. And there are a high enough number of students who do graduate at 16 and don't turn 17 until later in that year, maybe over the summer. But the point is that we got really young adults, very impressionable still, who now are in an environment away from home, where all the ills of society are now readily available, and whom, because of the social pressures and expectations from so many different areas, not that our guidance counselors and our teachers and our parents are saying go to a kegger. Some might have been, in fact, some did. But in general, just the fact that we're being ushered into this environment, and this environment has all of that readily available. But then on top of that, the hypersexualization. Okay? Folks, let's be real. I don't know how of a realistic picture you all have, but what goes on these college campuses in terms of sexuality is straight pornographic. It cannot be described any other way. Are there some students who have a reasonably normal experience and sexual experiences during their collegiate time that does not scar them in any way as they go forward in life? Yes. But is there far too many who are exposed to experiences that will alter their psyche and severely impact the way they live the rest of their lives? Yes, there are many. It is an unfortunate reality. Folks, there is essentially pornographic behavior going on mass, I tell you. In many of these, if not most of these colleges and or universities. Okay? Now, to make it even worse, when you start to add on the other layer of the fraternities and the sororities, oh, it really gets depraving. It really gets bad. Their experiences and the sexuality that they're opened up to and exposed to is, in the sight of many parents, if they were aware of it, horrific. How many of those parents planned on their 16, 17, 18-year-old daughter to go to school and be readily exposed to a sexual environment that is so prolific, that is so XXX rated, right? That is so so deprived of what they feel they've instilled in their children as moral values. If they had a clear understanding of what they were sending their child to go and experience, many would say, hell no, not my child. That's the reality of it. I'm talking about group sex, right? I'm talking about and I'm talking about large group sex with hardly no, if not no, contraception or any sort of a protection from STDs, et cetera, okay, or pregnancy. I'm talking about with the sororities and the fraternities, an environment where now certain sexual acts are actually made a requisite. Huh? Do y'all not know that there are certain campuses where, in order to make it into said sorority, that the girls are expected to essentially go through a gangbang, all too readily sponsored by and manned by the corresponding fraternity? How many of you knew that? How many of you knew that a lot of these group sex situations are filmed and make it up to the internet? Hmm? How many of you may have a child who didn't realize he or she was being filmed during a sexual act, group or non-group, but completely unaware that they might be about to be put on the internet committing a sexual act? How many times have things like that occurred and the act itself been so traumatizing to the child that they may have committed or pushed to attempting to commit suicide? Hmm? How many of those situations involve bullying and pressuring and peer pressuring? How many of those students may not actually want to even partake in something like that, but the peer pressure, the sheer power of the peer pressure is so weakening and so overlooming and consuming that they literally actually didn't have a choice. Hmm? All to get an education and a piece of paper that we see doesn't carry the same weight, doesn't hold the same promise, and has a much, much steeper financial bill behind it. The cost continues to soar almost exponentially. Have we gotten a realistic reason or reasonable explanation as to why that's even necessary, colleges and universities? Why has the tuition just continued to just skyrocket, right? Disproportionately with the increases uh, in societal financial environment, or what we call inflation, right? Think about that. And what kind of environment are we going into? And more importantly, are we sending our children into? Folks, what are we really sending them into? Is it really worth it? Is it really, really worth it? But once again, the allure of more of this, of success, right? A great career, opportunity, pushes us in that direction, has us push our children in that direction, all to have an experience that could change them forever, and in many ways, not good. We got to think about that. We got to think about that. Also, folks, and again, I apologize, y'all, but bear with me. We're getting through it. Also, I have to make mention of, what am I always referring to? The secret societies and the cabal of the socially economic elite globalists, right? We know that to gain and to raise in their ranks is a methodical system, right? But folks, what do we know about their hunting grounds or their recruiting grounds? Their largest recruiting ground, their absolute largest recruiting grounds, colleges and universities. If you think their mentality is not get them while they're young, then you're just naive. If you don't realize that, which you may not, and I won't call anyone naive on this one, but we may not realize that these colleges, the way they're structured, the way the whole collegiate experience for the student is structured, it puts them in a mental space and in a physical space to receive whatever indoctrination is set their way. After all, remember, their future depends on it. Think about that. Think about that. Think about, okay, haven't we talked about how the medical industry has become an industry, and the AMA guiding it is fraught with individuals who have a systematic indoctrination ingrained in them that is adherent to the agenda of the socially economic elite cabal of globalists? Have we not said that? Have we not pointed to how intrinsic this indoctrination is and how they escalate it in levels? It begins when we start talking about now the sort of preparation indoctrination they go through, unfortunately, all through childhood. But the real meat and potatoes of the indoctrination, where they really start to get into how these young adults view the world, and view the future they want to see for the world and their part in impacting it is shaped during the collegiate experience. Right? The colleges and universities are the number one recruiting grounds of the secret society organizations ran by, held by, controlled by, etc., the socially economic elite globalist cabal. And I'm telling you, folks, they are shrewd in when they see something in a candidate. Oh, they go right after them. Think about the environment that the child is walking into. This unsuspecting, let's say it's a brilliant young man, and they've identified his brilliance, and they want that. They want to use that, right? Let's say he's a little bit socially shy or in sort of a butterfly mode or whatever you want to call it. He's not very explorative in terms of his social experience and certainly not his sexuality. All of a sudden, here comes this really young, attractive girl who recognizes his brilliance and his intelligence and is attracted to that. And wow, isn't that great? Right? Unbeknownst to him or his parents, the young girl is actually directed to him by some faction of a secret society organization that had targeted him for recruitment. And the young girl used as what they call a honeypot draws him in. Herself only really understanding to a certain degree, as far as she knows, she's just reinvesting in her own future. Remember that. And how much indoctrination has she already gone through? Remember that. How many extreme sexual experiences and depravity has she been exposed to, and maybe even her spirit somewhat broken through? Remember that. How much indoctrination has she received daily from her sorority and how to take direction from higher ups? Remember that. The same thing can be flip-flopped, right? With a young, intelligent, bright, but maybe shy young girl, maybe kind of naive and not experienced, unsuspecting. Here comes the young jock, or here comes the young, maybe same thing, really intelligent guy, but he's handsome and he's a little more popular, right? Swoops her up into that world. Maybe comes from a family with money. Ooh, right? Sweeps her off her feet. It's all the same recipe. They have so many different ways. And I know thinking about it's like, really, does these things happen? Is it really that insidious? Folks, look into it. Don't take I always say that. Don't take my word for it. Do some free thinking investigation. Right? Talk to recent college students. Talk to those who may still be in college. Talk to folks who are recent graduates. Talk to folks who you know in your peer group who went to college and see the differences maybe between what their experiences was at those ages and what your experiences in life have been. It's very real, folks. Often what we think we're getting into, and most certainly as parents, what we think we're sending our child into is not the reality of what they arrive to find greeting them. Right? There is a lot that goes on in the collegiate experience. It is unfortunate that much of it is negative, low vibrational frequency indoctrination and systematic, in some cases, brainwashing, right? In some cases, brainwashing, or worse. If you're familiar with like the MK Ultra trauma-based experiences in brainwashing. I mean, folks, there's some things that I've seen involving very young collegiate students that, and things that I've heard stories about, and things that I've even, like I said, even 20, 30 years ago, experienced or found out about, that would blow the minds of parents sending their children into this environment. We need to do the research. We need to give it careful consideration and think twice. Do the research, careful consideration, and think twice. Look into this before you send your child away. As a young person, do your own free thinking research. It is your life. I know you got fun on your mind, and you should. That's fine. You're young. Life is to be enjoyed, and you should be having fun. You just came out of 12 years of doing something and showing up at a place that you didn't particularly want to, right? Now you feel free, and you're heading to a place that is offering an abundant future, or the promise of that, and a really exciting experience while you're there with a lot of your peers and a whole lot of fun, right? And a free experience where you can do some of the things that your parents maybe would have never let you experience, right? Careful what you wish for, because some of it may be experiences that you actually find you didn't want to experience, you didn't want to be a part of, and you certainly did not want to be in a situation where you're pressured into those things, right? And parents, I know for a fact that you don't want your children pressured into these situations and these environments and manipulated or controlled by these groups. I know I sure didn't, right? And I salute my daughter for even surviving through the experience she went through. She had an even added layer in her collegiate experience where she had to deal with battling racism that was pretty heavy and prevalent. So there's a lot there, folks. A lot. The HBCUs, first of all, I would caution everyone who is heavily invested mentally, or you know, tied to in some way, maybe have history in your family, or folks that you know, where there are many graduates from HBCUs. Hey, listen, maybe a lot of folks got a great education, but we need to know and understand the origins of these things. I think a lot of people don't understand or misunderstand the origin of HBCUs. Who started these? Who started them? Most of them. And then once you understand that, you've got to naturally ask the question, why? And then when you see some of the indoctrination that happens, then you start to understand why. And then when you see the environment and some of the things that go on in a place that many of us, particularly people of color, feel like they're sending their child to probably the safest and best place for them to be, because they're going to be around more young people who look like and think like them and come from backgrounds similar to them, right? And where there's some sense of pride in being, a melanated individual, and having, I stay away from saying black, y'all know that, in and having real roots in your educational experience. See, my son went to a HBCU. Have some realistic conversations with him, right? There may be things he's willing to be forthcoming with about his experience that might surprise you, right? Right? Um, I know that I have been made aware of some real heavy and the weight. Let me use that as a describing word. The weight of what many of the students who go to these HBCUs, not that it doesn't happen in other campuses, but again, there is that expectation of you're representing your people, right? So there's like an added layer of responsibility, right? You're in a place that is supposed to foster and show great respect for our experience as a people here in the wilderness of North America, right? But often, as my research has uncovered, there is an even greater sense of pressure to go along with things that might not be in alignment with the students' morality or the morality of the parents that sent them there. Folks, I'm just a messenger. Unfortunately, this is the reality, right? And again, not that these things don't take place in other colleges and campuses. They most certainly do, right? But there's that other added lever, right? You know, this is, first of all, it's another layer of another layer sort of your guard, both of the student and the guard of the parent being let down or peeled away, right? Because you're going to be with your people, or you're sending your child to be with your people, right? That's the feeling. There's a certain warmth we get there that we expect, right? That's why we do it, right? You want them to be about their people and to bring that education home to their people and do things that's going to further and better themselves, their family, their community, and their people on a whole, right? That's why we have this vision of what HBCUs are. Again, I would say it is very interesting when you start to look at the origins of these HBCUs. Then you start to look at what the experience actually is in terms of the message and potential indoctrination, we'll say. And then when you look at some of the things that the children, that the students are exposed to and made to be a part of, because of that extra layer of pressure that's socially engineered into their experience. I go back into the chat. Carrie says, Grambling State, and he met his girlfriend there, and I love her. He started to pledge, but he didn't want to do some of the things they wanted him to do. Wow. Well, there it is right there. Shout out, Sister Carrie, and acknowledgement and salute to your son for being free thinking and independent enough to recognize that, for one, to identify it to himself and to you as well, and then to have the strength and the fortitude to not be a part of some of those things, right? Right? This is the reality of it, folks. This is the reality of it. And who knows what things he might have to report back to you had he gone through with it, had he gone a little further in the recruiting experience or the hazing experience, right? I'm just saying, when you look at some of the things that young people have to go through to be a part of some of these aspects of that experience, I wouldn't want it for my son or daughter and or anyone else's, right? Um, but I must say they did pay for his master's. Excellent, excellent. And like I said from the beginning, there are many folks who get a great education, who may have an all-around great experience that propels them in life. That's good. That's great. But far too often, again, our students are experiencing and are made to experience and have to deal with, put in a position of having to deal with things that are contrary to their morality or the morality of us as parents as we send our children to these places. All right? So it is a very, and folks, I mean, I hate to say it, but like you can just go ahead and Google and you can pull up, not that I make it, just so you know, right? Not that I watch these things or that I find any pleasure in viewing these things, but it is informing and empowering to know and be aware that they're there. But there are porn sites that carry specifically collegiate experiences. Think about that. That it's prevalent enough that the porn industry finds it reasonable to create sites that are specifically geared toward, or even if it's not an entire site, it's a genre within a site, right? Geared toward college students, right? Just because technically once they're over 18, it's legal. Folks, these are still children, right? They're not even 20 years old. They're still children in my purview. Yeah. Yeah. So it's deep. You know, in general, I think that peer pressure and bullying, and then I didn't even go there. Like, do we think that bullying is sequestered to and held only to high school? That happens also in the collegiate environment and can potentially become worse because of all those things I just talked about. So we have to truly, truly be careful what we're asking for in reality when we send our children to these colleges and universities. And I know I went off on a minor tangent about the HBCUs. I didn't mean to single them out particularly, as much as I wanted to identify the fact that often our guards are let down, particularly in the quote unquote African American community, when we send our children away to environments that we expect to be a little bit more fostering of their morals and our morals in sending them there. In many ways, they may be, but in other ways, it could be quite the opposite, right? All right. Man, Sister Carrie in here, strong riding with me. I know other folks will chime in later and check it out later, but thank you so much. A big bang salute to you, and I'm sure enough going to get in the chat and do some little activity there, some blowing up emojis or whatever I can find for you, baby. I appreciate you tremendously. Let me get in here and see what I can find. Something. There's got to be something powerful here. I don't know. There's a few clocks because you know what time it is, right? And what else can we go with? I don't know. I'm tripping. I'm devoid of exactly what I want to say. I don't know. Let's get some explosions. Right. Okay. Well, hold on. I don't know. Where's the explosions and stuff at? Oh, all right. Whatever, babe. You know, you get the point. The point is, I appreciate you tremendously. And thank you for being down, right? With the worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect 100. Thank you tremendously, Sister Carrie, and anybody else who may have chimed in and then jump back out. That's fine. What's important is that we got the message out and that we are continuing to have these conversations, right? And continuing to grow and learn from one another and continuing to do what? To build, to lay the bricks down and build that foundation for the new paradigm, right? That we are ushering in right now. One that we like to say exhibits, exudes peace, love, respect. All right, man, magnificent. Well, I would have liked more folks to have chimed in, but again, Sister Carrie, I'm tremendously grateful to you. I love you and I appreciate you. Please come back and be with me again next week. This week I didn't get notification out to folks. I'll correct that with the coming week and make sure that we get folks aware and ramped up in. And also, I'm going to be making a change. I wanted more people to be here to hear me make this announcement, but I'm still going to make the announcement just the same. Thank you, Carrie. You are most certainly welcome, and I appreciate you tremendously. I appreciate you being in here with me. But next week, I'm changing and switching things up now and going forward. Instead of 3:33, look for me at 5:55. 5:55. That's the new synchronicity we're catching. 5 is representative of the energy of change. And we are changing, surging powerfully forward in this shifting of the paradigms. And I want that to be representative of and reminiscent of us catching the synchronicity of 5:55. So from now on and forward, I'm going to be airing at 5:55 instead of 3:33. 5 o'clock and 55 minutes, 5 minutes to 6. However you want to make it and switch it around, that's when I'm going to be airing. And I will get word to as many people as possible that it will be 5:55, and I won't wait till the last minute to do so. All right. Sister Carrie, thank you so much. Anybody else who chimed in or in and out or whatever you did, I thank you. And anybody who watches the podcast, as it will still be available for future viewings. Thank you all. I love you all. Please be with me next week at 5:55 for another episode of Building with Big King as we lay the bricks to build the foundation of a new world paradigm. One that we like to say exhibits, exudes peace, love, respect. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I love you all. I'll see you next week. Worldwide movement. Peace, love, respect. Big King Sadiq out.